Anna Bananarama. Hello, am I the 100th caller? Yes, you win a bunch of Ginsu steak knives. Is it Ginsu? What was the infomercial back in the 80s? I think that's right. Rob Dev. Are you the same Rob that I play poker with? 1,000 Pine points to you, Ghostlight. 500 Pine points to you. And my buddy Phil, 250. Jack Russell says, damn, just missed out again. Yeah, you did. You missed out again. But you know what? Just try harder next time. I won't castigate you that hard today, the fourth place. Castigate, for those from Regina, Saskatchewan, means to reprimand, that's even a big word, to make, to feel bad, to shame. That's what castigate means. Okay, so we'll get right into this. What is one of the best questions to ask Christians and Muslims? And this question was asked of Koukl, who's a evangelical Protestant Christian guy. And this question, I think, applies to almost any version of Christianity and also Islam. So it's a good question. Here we go. And there's no video, just audio.
Told to respond,
but does not practice,
manipulate the gods. God,
PineCreek, I was castigated as a puppy.
not be manipulated.
Jack Russell.
All right, let's change gears here. Here's a question from D. Guy.
Here it is.
I have a friend who is Jewish, but does not practice Judaism. This friend says there is no mention of heaven or hell in the Torah. I haven't had time to research his claim. Therefore, he doesn't believe there is an afterlife. How would you respond if only using the Torah?
Right there. That's it. That's one of the best questions to ask. And it's similar to the question that Apostate Prophet asked the Muslims recently. And where was it? Was it EF Dawa on their YouTube channel? The Kaaba is a really important thing. Why isn't it mentioned in the Old Testament if Abraham built it? This is that type of question. It's one of those absence of evidence is indeed evidence of absence, because all you have to do if you're a Christian or Muslim is just think about it. What's one of the most important things about your religion? Isn't it about the afterlife? Like, really, what's at stake? Why should anyone be a Muslim? Why should anyone be a Christian? Isn't life just a vapor here on planet Earth? Isn't the real issue what happens after we die? If you agree with that, then this is about expectations. Wouldn't you expect the God of the universe to tell people about this in its very first revelations given to people? Like, I would think if I were a God and this is what it's at stake, I would say this would be like almost one of the first things out of my mouth. Hey, people, listen. All this, what I'm about to say, is important because after you die, that's when the real party begins. Now, there's no mention of streets of gold in the Torah. The Torah is basically the first 5 books of the Bible. Technically, Job, I think, is the earliest book written, but as presented in the canon, the Jewish canon, no mention of streets of gold, of mansions, of this idea of spending eternity with in God's presence. And definitely, there's no mention in the earliest books of the Bible of a threat of, look, if you don't believe this stuff, if you reject this stuff, if you rebel against this stuff, there is a huge punishment awaiting you forever and ever and ever and ever. Imagine being a Jew or Ishmael, the first Muslim, right? Back in that time. And you're in your deathbed. Do you honestly think, Christians and Muslims, that the people on their deathbed back then were thinking to themselves, oh man, I'm a little nervous here. Am I going to go to heaven or am I going to go to hell? Is there any indication to think that this is what they were concerned about? Of spending eternity in this other dimension called heaven or hell? For eternity? And yet, if you listen to many Christians and many Muslims today, this is what's at stake. This whole idea of progressive revelation really makes me want to throw up in my mouth. Because this is the excuse that many Christians and Muslims will give. Well, Islam, by definition, is the final revelation, right? It progressed from Judaism to Christianity, but they screwed things up and got things wrong. So now we need the new final revelation. And with Christianity, it's, well, this is the old covenant, and now we got a new covenant. And God just likes to go step by step by step, slowly, because he knows humans can't handle it. He knows those people on their deathbed 3,000-4,000 years ago couldn't handle the truth. So he has to go slowly. He knows they can't handle being told not to have slaves. He has to work within the culture, the milieu of the time. Wouldn't you expect the God of the universe, the creator of the universe, to let people, if it were true, there's this eternal heaven and mansions, streets of gold, or this eternal conscious torment or really bad place where you spend eternity, and if you don't obey, you don't repent, you don't accept the gift of salvation, that you're headed there, don't you think that God would have mentioned it to these people 3,000, 4,000 years ago? But he didn't. He didn't. He did not. Maybe he just didn't care about those people. Milieu. Yes, man, right. Milieu. How would you define that word for people from liberal, where was it, Liberal City? No, Liberal Kansas. Yeah. How would you explain that word to people from Liberal? Okay, let's see how Greg Koukl tackles this.
Well, it's difficult.
It's difficult, yes.
To respond to a challenge like that. Okay, what if I said there is no heaven or hell mentioned in John chapter 6? Maybe that's not a good source, but the point is I'm just restricting it. So how can you argue for heaven or hell if it's not mentioned?
He mentions one chapter of one book. We're talking about the first 5 books of the Bible here, not just one chapter of one book.
John chapter 6. Well, that may not be the purpose of John 6. It's actually John 6 does talk about eternal life, so it's not a good characterization, but you know what I'm talking about, what I'm referring to. If you say, I'm limiting it to these scriptures, okay, argue for something, even though it's not mentioned in this. Well, that's an artificial restraint. Okay, the Pentateuch was meant to accomplish a particular thing. By the way, just saying, the word love doesn't even occur until Deuteronomy.
I think this is why Muslims don't emphasize that attribute of God as much as Christians do. Because I think Greg Koukl's right. The early writings in the Bible don't really portray God as a God of love. He's more of a God of justice and of power and of might. You can just, I've just got the dopamine levels raised in Muslims listening right now. They, oh yes, hallelujah, amen, PineCreek, that's our God. power, might, justice. And the Christians, but God is a God of love. He loves you. He died for you.
Okay, Deuteronomy is the last book of the Pentateuch. What if I said God's love is not even mentioned in the first 4 books of the Pentateuch? So how can you say God's loving when in the first 4 books it's not there?
I'm so glad Greg mentioned this, because here's a Christian admitting this. And which is, again, what would you expect if God, one of the amazing attributes of God is that he's love, and yet he doesn't mention this to his people early on? By the way, I'm saying all these things because I love you deeply. I look at you like each person down there, and I love you, I love you, I love you. Oh, and I really love you. No, I love you all the same, but I love you, I love you. None of this stuff in the Old Testament, in the Pentateuch.
Argue for God's love. Well, you can't from those first 4 books where it's not mentioned. Okay.
Erin asks, is there any verse that quotes Jesus saying, I love you? I'm pretty sure that's a no. Well, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. But yeah, does Jesus look anybody in the face and say, I love you? That's a good question.
But that's because those books had a different purpose. They are not meant to just.
Okay, he's saying the reason why it's heaven and hell is not mentioned. He's admitting that this Jewish, non-practicing Jewish fellow is correct. He's admitting this here, that the concepts of heaven and hell as Christians view it today is not mentioned in the Pentateuch, in the first 5 books of the Bible. But he's saying, well, but that's not the purpose. It's not the purpose of these books. But what's the purpose of your religion, for goodness sake? What's the purpose of the whole story? Even in Islam, what is the deal? You don't need Allah. You don't need Yahweh to have a good life here on earth. Look at all the successful and affluent Hindus and Buddhists and atheists in the world. We don't need your religion to be happy and healthy and wise and financially secure. We don't need your gods for that, or to even be moral. A lot of Christians admit this. You don't need your Christianity to be moral. No, they'll say you're borrowing from our worldview. Sure, okay, fine. But we don't need belief in order to have all these things. We don't need to accept Islam to have all these things. What's the real purpose? The real purpose is to guarantee, or not, maybe guarantee is the wrong word, especially in Islam, is to get, hopefully, eternal life and avoid the bad place. This is the whole purpose of why God revealed himself, yes? So you can have relationship with him in Christianity, so you can obey him in Islam, so you can avoid that punishment and get the reward. Yet this wasn't the purpose of the Pentateuch. Very strange, very, very strange indeed. If I think we would expect, if this was the purpose, it would have been mentioned straight away.
Describe eschatology. All right. Now, there is eschatology, that is, end things. How does this all work out? Heaven and hell, final resurrection, that kind of stuff, in other parts of the scripture. You see it in Job, which, by the way, arguably, Job is the earliest book penned.
Okay, now this is interesting. So it's weird because Greg Koukl seems to admit that the questioner has a good point, that he agrees with the premise of the question, that heaven and hell is not mentioned in the Pentateuch, but now he's mentioning Job as the earliest book does mention it. So, okay, so now we're getting somewhere.
And where Job says, without my flesh, I shall see God. Okay, and you see...
Without my flesh. Is that right? Is that true? See, this is, I really don't know. But this is how I do it. I go to Bible Gateway and I go Job 1 to 30. Oops, sorry. And I search the word. I go Control F for people from Liberal Kansas. I go Control F and then I type in, what was one of the keywords? Flesh. Not there. Not there. Not there. Okay. I'm fact checking, Great Koukl. Always fact check your pastors, your apologists, your priests, your imams. Don't believe what they say at face value. Yeah, you heard me. Don't believe them. Control F, flesh. In fact, a lot of priests, pastors, apologists, imams would agree with me. Yeah, fact check me. Oh, here we go. I found it. What chapter is this? Job 19, verse 22. Job 19, verse 22. Job 19, verse 22. Job 19, verse 22. Let me show you guys. New International Version. Oh yeah, this is not the King James, so it's probably wrong. Why do you pursue me as God does? Will you never get enough of my flesh? What? That can't be it. What is Great Koukl talking about? How is the book of Job talking about heaven or hell here? Is this a stretch? Here we go. After my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. What? I know my Redeemer lives and that in the end he will stand on earth. After my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. That must be a bad translation because I'm not getting heaven and hell from this. 1926. Okay, all English translations. And I shall be clothed again with my skin, and in my flesh I will see my God. I mean, we actually have flesh when in heaven. Well, it's a spiritual body, I thought. After my skin has been destroyed, clothed in my flesh, I will see God. And I know that after this body is decayed, that this body shall see God. Okay, that doesn't have flesh in it. I'm just going through a whole bunch of different translations. The King James is the right one. Where's the King James? Everybody knows the King James is the only true translation. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see God. Is this the verse Greg Koukl is using to justify that the Old Testament is talking about this concept of heaven? Even after my skin is destroyed, then I will see God in my flesh. Wow, I guess we will bleed in heaven if there is a heaven. My goodness.
It in Daniel, making reference to things that are going to happen in the future and an ultimate resurrection. I think it's Daniel 12 talks about a resurrection. But you don't see these.
But a resurrection to what? To where? For who?
More graphic descriptions of heaven or hell. You see descriptions of God's punishment, but most of God's punishment depicted in the Old Testament is characterized by physical descriptions of what happens to the physical body. Now, Tim Barnett and I talked about this when we wrote the series called Hell Interrupted, a Solid Ground series, 1, 2, and 3, to answer the challenges that many Christians...
Yeah, I agree with Alan Bird here. No hell or heaven in Job. It's a resurrection to life on earth, possibly. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Have raised against the...
Although some Christians will say that heaven is a place on earth, that it'll be a new earth, but it's still earth.
The idea of eternal torment.
But still, we're lacking this idea of hell, which is really people are more risk adverse than reward seeking. So both in Islam and Christianity, the issue is not so much heaven or paradise. The issue is hell, because people are kind of okay with ceasing to exist. They're kind of okay with not going to heaven, but they're not okay with being tortured forever.
We're arguing, look, things are just destroyed. They're gone. There's smoke rising to heaven kind of thing. So they're gone. And my point with regards to the Old Testament passages was that the focus was on what could visibly be seen.
Yes.
But the final word is the...
Yes, this is a point that Jews often make, or I've heard some Jews often make, and that is this whole idea of blessings and cursings is evidence of God. If you follow God, you'll be blessed. If you reject and rebel against God, you'll be cursed. And here's my theory. And I don't think I've read this in a book, because I don't read books. But I think Jews saw that you can reject Yahweh and still be successful in life. And they didn't like that. So the concept of heaven and hell was derived or made up to say, okay, you're successful now, even though you rebelled Yahweh, but just you wait. Oh, you wait till after you die, then you'll really get it. And I think this evolved because as the Jews started to mingle with people of other cultures and other tribes, they got to see firsthand success without their God. And that didn't sit well with them. And you'll see this today even amongst Muslims and Christians when they see successful people, even, and I just don't mean financially. I mean success in how they handle themselves, how they treat others, how calm, content, peaceful, leveled they are. And they go, what? How can this be? They shouldn't be this way if they don't follow the one true God. And so this whole concept of, well, just you wait. You will suffer someday. You might be laughing now. You might be content now. You might have it all now, but just you wait. There's a penalty for rejecting the one true God. But you don't find this in the Pentateuch.
The last word, and we get the final word in the New Testament, the Gospels with Jesus, and the book of Revelation. And that adds information that we didn't have early on. There is clearly this idea of progressive revelation in Scripture, even in the Pentateuch. You start out with some basic stuff in Genesis.
What's more likely, that the God of the universe likes to progress his revelation over time, or that people make stuff up and then change it later, refine it later, add to it later? What's more likely?
And then more is added. Progressive revelation. So you get more details in Exodus and Leviticus regarding how God works out the promise he made to Abraham in Genesis 12 to build a nation, because a nation requires not only a group of people but also a government that provides content and
Lavington asks, can't I just be a heathen until the last 5 minutes and repent on my deathbed? Won't I be covered? Isn't that in the Bible? Yes, Lavington, that's a great idea. But here's the problem with that idea. The problem is you don't know when you're going to die, right? Unless you have like government-assisted suicide like Jesus did, and you plan your death. But according to Christianity, not in Islam, but in Christianity, you could plan it out that way. But then you got to be sincere, and it's really tough to choose to be sincere if you don't really believe this stuff.
Cohesiveness to that group, that comes in Exodus and Leviticus, all right? So that's later. It's progressive revelation. As time goes on, God reveals more of what is necessary.
Yeah, Muslims are applauding you right now, Greg. Do you realize this? Progressive revelation. See, Greg Koukl's all for progressive revelation as long as it stops at the book of Revelation in the New Testament. And then, no more progressive revelation after that. But we can progress beyond the Old Testament. That's no problem. So Old Testament progression, no problem. New Testament, no problem. But Islam, Mormonism, no. Isn't it interesting how religious people like to choose where the progression stops?
So therefore, it's not a failure because certain things that are part of the whole story are not mentioned in the beginning of the story.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a wrong way to approach it. Wait a minute. How can you say the Ten Commandments? I don't see the Ten Commandments anywhere in the book of Genesis.
Oh, that's a good point. Great Koukl saying, hey, the Ten Commandments are not in Genesis, they're in Exodus. Still in the Pentateuch, though, first 5 books. But still, so maybe are the 10 Commandments not that important then? Well, actually, a lot of Christians would say the 10 Commandments are not that important because we have it in the New Testament. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That basically encompasses the whole 10 Commandments, so we don't need no stinking 10 Commandments. I've heard some Christians, well, they don't say stinking, but I've heard some Christians say it that way. But the point is, the 10 Commandments really are not as important as the concepts found about the afterlife with heaven and hell. That's what it's all about. It's not about how we treat people here on planet Earth. Well, it is. But the reason why you treat people well here on planet Earth and obey God here on planet Earth is because of the afterlife, which is not mentioned in the Pentateuch.
Show me the Ten Commandments in Genesis. If you can't show me the Ten Commandments in Genesis, then that's not significant or important. Well, Genesis is the book of beginnings.
Now, why is all this important if you're a Christian who just popped in or a Muslim? This is important because it's a clue that the concept of the afterlife is just made up by humans. It's a hope, a desire conjured up by humans for various reasons. To feel good about someone who's better than you in life and to maybe compensate for the suffering you've gone through in life, that you have this hope of it getting better, to help you survive here on planet Earth, to look down on other religions because, well, they think they got it, but really they're going to pay later. This is a clue that this whole concept has just been made up. Now, the question someone could pose to me, though, is, well, Doug, okay, let's say in Genesis chapter 1, it mentioned the afterlife. Would you believe then? That's a good question. It's a good question because I probably would say, no, it's still made up. But as an internal critique for the Christian or the Muslim listening, I think it's a very, very fair expectation that the most important point of Christianity and Islam, that it should have, this important point should have been mentioned very early. And it wasn't.
And so you have the beginning of the world, you have the beginning of mankind, you have the beginning of the problem, and you have the beginning of the solution, which is God's call of Abraham and the promise made there, and how that works out. It's not intended for that. So I think that the question is misplaced. And
yeah. How many times have you heard that when a atheist asks a believer a question and they say, your question is just misplaced. Your question is just not valid. It's a malformed question.
To demand that one section deliver all of these goods, I think is inappropriate. Does God have to mention heaven and hell in the Pentateuch? No, the Pentateuch was for a different purpose.
I love this. I absolutely love this because he's tacitly admitting that it's not found in the Old Testament or in the Pentateuch by what he's saying right now. Because if I say that as an atheist to a Christian or Muslim listening, they're going to go, no, you're wrong. They're just going to immediately push back. But when a fellow Christian to other Christians says this, They go, what? Is Greg Koukl right? I never knew this before. This is strange. This is weird.
It was laying the foundation for the theocracy and also God's plan for rescuing the world.
I just got a text. It's from God, from Yahweh. He says, yeah, Greg Koukl is indeed correct. There's no mention of heaven and hell in the Pentateuch. I left it out because I'm a schmuck, happy face.
By the way, if
I
well,
apologize.
I was just going to say, if
that was God's speech. That's God's joke. God does have a sense of humor.
God has got a plan to rescue the world, that means there is a cost if it's not rescued, or some are not rescued. Okay, there's a price to pay. So the rescue means something, and it is unfortunate that Jewish people who are acknowledging the Pentateuch as central, which it is, don't look at the other books that bear witness to some of these other things.
Oh, he's saying it's a shame that the Jews who focus on the Torah, it's a shame they don't look at the New Testament. That's really what he's saying. Yeah, it's a shame that the Christians don't look at the Quran, the progressive revelation, the final revelation, really, to correct, to refine the things in the New Testament. It's a shame the Jews don't look at the New Testament. It's a shame that the Christians don't look at the Quran. And it's a shame, you Muslims, that you don't look at the Book of Mormon. Shame. More progressive revelation. Because one of the biggest prophets, it wasn't Muhammad, but Jesus, the prophet that Muslims accept, appeared in the Americas in the 1800s, was it? To a guy and perfected it even more. The revelation.
Okay. It's curious. Now I'm thinking about it. Our questioner's friend, who is not a practicing Jew, is faulting Christian theology because it's not in the Pentateuch. Does he really care what's in the Pentateuch? If heaven and hell were in the Pentateuch, would that make a difference for him? It doesn't sound like it.
No, I agree with Greg here. It doesn't sound like this guy would care anyhow.
No, because it says he wasn't practicing.
It's a goofy. Yeah, well, okay, there you go. So, what would it, look at all of in the Pentateuch, you have the whole sacrificial system, right? The sacrificial system is to secure forgiveness for the people.
Right, but no mention of heaven and hell. That last eternity, streets of gold, mansions, eternal conscious torment, no mention of that.
If the people weren't forgiven, what would be the consequence? Well, it would have
cursing here on planet Earth, right?
Have to be something, or else there's no point in forgiving them. And certainly the consequence isn't in.
Oh, really? Okay, that's interesting.
In this life.
In that instance, I think he could argue that it was the curse.
Oh, you know what? I should have tweeted Amy. We talk once in a while. Amy Hall, this woman here. She should come on. Amy, if you're here, you're welcome to come on.
So the Mosaic Law.
Greg too, but I'm assuming Greg, yeah, if he comes on, then I'll definitely have to get my bloviation alert ready.
Law had the blessings and the curses. If they weren't forgiven, then they would receive the curses for their nation. So maybe he could answer that way. But one thing I wanted to expand on that you mentioned, Greg, the idea that God was doing something at the beginning, even in just the revelation as he's revealing things, he was changing a whole worldview. He was shaping and creating a whole worldview. And what he did was he did that through history. He did that through physical things to later on illustrate spiritual things. So, for example, the Exodus, rescue from slavery, rescue from sin. Later on, they used that to illustrate rescuing from sin. There was the temple, which had all these physical things that you do that later on you find out in Hebrews how all these things represented Christ, and it was preparing people to see the spiritual aspects of what was going on.
Yeah, that only took how many years, how many centuries? 1,000? Oh, I mean, But when you look back, it all makes sense. But those poor people 3,000-4,000 years ago, man, they must have been confused. I mean, how would they know that that Jesus was preparing a place for them?
And the same thing happened with judgment, Greg. You mentioned this part. If you go and you look, I think 2 Peter and maybe even Jude talks about how the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah is an illustration for us of what will happen in the afterlife, God's judgment. Mm-hmm. So just because God hadn't explained all that yet, that wasn't the way he was operating. He was creating these ideas in their culture to shape their worldview so that the spiritual ideas would make sense. And
a Christian and Muslim are trying to get in here and teach me something, but I'm a pacifist, but my working line German Shepherd isn't, and he'll take care of him. But yeah, listen to what Amy's saying. She's just saying that, well, he's demonstrating through actions. He doesn't come out and say what's really at stake here with heaven and hell, but he's illustrating it through, the slavery in the Exodus and all the things that happen in the Old Testament. God, that's just the way God operates. He likes to God is like a screenplay writer. He likes to give his revelation out in little chunks. He likes to have a climax somewhere close to the end of the story and then have it, resolve at the very end and then run the final credits.
Use the physical things in history to make sure we understood the spiritual things.
Yeah.
Now, there's one other thing, Greg, that occurred to me. Because this is exactly the argument that was going on between the Sadducees and the Pharisees, whether or not there was a resurrection. This is why they had the big fight when Paul says, I'm here defending the resurrection. And there was a huge fight. Mm-hmm. But it occurred to me that somebody asked Jesus this very question. And in Luke 20, they come to him and they say, well, if a man has a wife and then the man dies and she takes the next husband and then he dies and then he goes on. And then he says, which one will...
Holy Shift says God's giving the gist. Yes, I like that. That makes me laugh because I always think of Mike Licona. Maybe Mike Licona's onto something. The New Testament, the Gospels give the gist of who Jesus was, what he said, what he did. Just the gist. It might not be, perfect in every detail. And maybe that's how God did it in the Old Testament too. It's just the gist. It's like, yeah, I don't really want to come out and say that there's mansions ready for you in this great place called heaven where you'll spend eternity worshiping me, and that there's this evil place or bad place called hell where you'll be in torment. I don't want to mention that just overtly. I just give you a little hint, a little gist of what's to come.
Her husband in the afterlife, because they're trying to make the afterlife look silly.
In the resurrection.
In the resurrection,
I think, is the way they refer to it. So the resurrection is the event that leads to the afterlife. So they believed in the afterlife, these legalistic, Torah-observant Jews.
The Sadducees don't know is this...
Yeah, they might have believed in afterlife, but where was it? What was it like? Was it here on planet Earth? They're dead and then they rise again. It really sounds like the passage you quoted, Greg, in the book of Job really makes it sound like it's real flesh. You'll be resurrected and have a fleshly body here on planet Earth. And no mention of hell.
The Pharisees did, not the Sadducees.
So the Sadducees are asking him this question to show him that there is no afterlife. So it says they say that there is no resurrection, and that's why they were trying to make it look foolish. And here was Jesus' response, because here
Amy's admitting that from the Jewish perspective, the Jews don't even know. I mean, they can't figure it out. Sadducees thought one thing, the Pharisees thought another thing, the Essenes probably thought of something else. The Jews don't even know, or are not clear on the details of the afterlife.
Can give. He says, but that the dead are raised, even Moses showed in the passage about the burning bush, where he calls the Lord the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. Now he is not the God of the dead, but of the living. So
excellent.
That was Jesus' response. So that's one.
Well, couldn't you say that verse, God is the God not of the dead, but of the living, meaning that, well, it just makes sense. If you're dead, you're gone. You're non-existent. God's not the God of the non-existent. That just doesn't make any logical sense. He's the God of the living. One could say that Jesus himself is portraying in that one verse the idea of no afterlife. Because when you're dead, you're dead. Oh, I forgot. Dead means you just changed locations. Yeah, Jesus changed locations for your sins.
Answer.
That's right. In other words, those who had died relative to Moses, they were in the past, they were dead and gone, are still alive in themselves, not in God's memory, but in themselves at that temporal moment. I actually think this is a good argument for the temporality of God, at least since the creation, because...
Oh, you know what I think of when I hear this? Greg Koukl saying that God is not, it sounds like Greg's admitting God's not outside of time, that he's in time. Now, we're not talking about seconds, hours, and minutes. We're talking temporally, that in thoughts, God is sequential. He has one thought and then another thought. And that other thought was after the first thought. And the first thought was before the second thought. Now, if this is true, if God is in time temporally, I think they call this the A theory of time. I'm not a philosopher. But if that's true, then this whole infinite regress problem applies to God himself. No, it doesn't, Doug, because he's outside of time. Plato said that.
Those individuals, he cites, are alive to God in the now, which is what makes the argument for the resurrection work. And if there is no now for God, which would be the case if he was atemporal, outside of time, then the argument wouldn't work.
Yeah, he just admitted it. Am I hearing this? Is Greg admitting that God is not outside of time? He can't be. Like, bye-bye, Kalam cosmological argument. I mean, not the two premise and conclusion argument, but all the add-ons they put on at the end, that God has to be the cause of because he's outside of time and he's not material. You know, remember this? Uh-oh. Greg, you got to rethink these things.
That's another issue, and you know,
never was asked, where can I find the PineCreek streaming schedule? The PineCreek streaming schedule is only in the mind of God, who can see the future, because I don't even have a schedule.
Thinking, wait a minute, I never.
But when God knows I'm going to schedule in the future, I can guarantee you I will, because if I don't, then God knew wrong.
But the point there is that those individuals who were dead to Moses are actually alive to God in the moment. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and
Okay, now I'm confused. Now that makes it sound like God's outside of time, because if they're dead,
Jacob. Another point too is Jesus makes a theological argument based on the Old Testament scriptures and the tense of a word. In other words,
okay, this game is starting to get boring to me. But you guys get the point, right? It's all about expectations. If you agree that the main point of Christianity and Islam is about the reward, the carrot, and the stick, hell, if this is what it's all about, because here on earth is just a vapor, life here is short, it's about the party starting after you die. This is what's at stake. If this is the real issue, why you should obey God, why you should accept the gift of salvation, then you would expect that the God of the universe would have mentioned it way sooner than just 2,000 years ago for the Christians and 1,400 years ago for the Muslims. Those poor people who came before Christianity, who came before Islam, those poor people, they were really in the dark when it comes to heaven and hell. They didn't know Jesus was preparing a mansion for them. There'd be streets of gold. They didn't know that there would be eternal conscious torment, that devil would put him in hell. Man, I feel sorry for those people. Okay, shifting gears. Yesterday, I had a really good conversation with a woman named Rebecca on Digital Gnosis's channel. And I want to play a bit of it. I didn't timestamp it, so I might jump around a little bit, so forgive me. But my mind was blown in a few spots. And let's see if I can find it here.
At that time, that...
Yeah, I basically asked her the poof or drown question. And I asked her a question about why can't you disagree with God, or not disagree? Why can't you have an opinion different than God's and state it out loud and say that you would have done things differently? Let's see if I can find it.
Would I get that space is salt water?
Genesis, where it all began.
Oh yeah, right here we're talking about what she takes as literal and not. Back at the flat earthers, a lot of them get their models from Genesis.
Well,
And they can't be wrong because they believe in God.
From the King James rendering of Genesis.
Yeah. But before I go, you're such a loving person, Rebecca. What I find interesting is you do believe in a lot of the literal stories. The stories in the Old Testament as literal, like the flood story. How Camille Gregor's channel is called Cam with a C and Cam with a K. Cam and Cam. How do you view Jesus as someone who, in the New Testament, says, "Let the children come to me," puts them on his knee, and says they're precious in his sight? And in the Old Testament, he drowns them. How do you consolidate that in your head?
Well, I mean, first of all, God is God. So I'm not going to argue with God if he says, which it does, I mean, this is what it says in Genesis, that at that time that humans were only thinking evil all the time and that violence had filled the earth. So I don't see this as...
See, okay, it just totally boggles my mind. Help me understand this, Christians. When I ask about toddlers and babies being drowned in the Old Testament, her immediate thought is, number one, don't argue with God. Why not? Well, he knows more than me. He's the creator of the universe. Where were you? Okay, I can even grant all that. But you can still, you're a human being with thoughts. You can still wrestle with God, debate with God, argue with God, if only for sheer entertainment purposes. Why are some of you Christians scared? There's even precedent for that in the Old Testament, where people barter with God, where people wrestle with God. On this topic of who is the real Jesus, does he put kids on his knee and give them a hug and a kiss and say, "I love you"? Or does he sometimes drown these kids, put water in their lungs? And then secondly, her thought immediately shifts to all these people were evil. Now, depending on what type of Christian you are, really? A 2-year-old's evil? A baby is evil? This is where immediately where your thoughts go? Or are you trying to justify that their parents were evil and they would have raised their kids to be evil because there's no free will, right? And they would have been guaranteed to be evil, so God had to smite them. I just don't get this. And please hear me, some Christians are listening and say, "I don't believe Jesus, God said this or did this." I understand. I'm talking about this version of Christianity. I can only surmise that or guess that there has to be some fear going on here. The fear of questioning the creator of the universe. I know for a lot of Muslims, that's definitely the case. I get this is the word picture I get in my mind. That if you're to question God about something he did in the past, that it's like you're a slave in chains and God is the master with a whip, and you're the slave, and you're looking up, why are you doing this? And you're scared that this master is going to go, "Whoots! How dare you question me?" This is the word picture. It's the only explanation I can think of that answers this question of mine. Because there are some Christians who say, yeah, God, why did you do this? This sucks. Some Christians have no problems asking that question. But for Christians like Rebecca, it's like, no, you can't ask that. You can't question God. Here's my advice. Now, this is partly the way I was raised. I was raised to question authority. But here's my advice to Muslims and Christians like Rebecca. Question the God you worship and serve. Don't be scared. In fact, go even further than that. Say out loud in your prayer time what you don't like about God. This is real relationship. There's times where my wife has said what she doesn't like about me or things that I should change, and vice versa. This is real relationship between humans. If the relationship with God is like that in any way, you should be able to talk to God and say, I don't like what you did here. Now, again, some Christians can do this, but I really got the impression yesterday when I talked to Rebecca that she can't. And it boggles my mind why she can't.
Something that God wanted to do or that was his ideal, but that this is what God did to, actually it saved humanity because we were killing each other off. So
yeah, but we're talking about toddlers and babies here. Like, I think if you take the story literally,
why would you kill everyone off to prevent everyone from being killed off?
Well, no. Travis, you made me laugh. Why would we kill everybody off to prevent people from killing everybody off? We didn't kill everybody off, just the good Noah's family. And then they, through incest, repopulated the earth.
Well,
I'll grant that God can kill whoever he wants, but it's the method of killing that I'm asking about. So God could have just poofed them out of existence, yes? But he chose to fill the lungs of these toddlers and babies with water to get rid of them.
Honestly, PineCreek.
Isn't it? But no, what I said is true in your worldview, yes? Yeah.
Yes. But what's weird to me is that, like, you would have such an incredible problem with this. If we're talking about God,
I don't believe it happened.
Well, I know.
Okay. So she's flabbergasted at me just like I'm flabbergasted at her. And she's flabbergasted at me because why do you have such a big problem with this? Rebecca, all my cards are on the table for you and anybody like Mike Winger, who I've asked this to. I'm trying to take that cognitive dissonance pedal and put it to the metal. Pedal to the metal. I'm trying to make you as uncomfortable with your God as possible. Because I'm appealing to your moral intuitions. Especially for people like you, who I think is truly a kind and compassionate person. I think you don't mean harm to people. And I think this does raise the cognitive dissonance in you.
I'm saying, like, if it did happen, like, why would this be a problem for the creator of the universe who can poof you in and out of it?
It's not a problem for the creator of the universe if it happened. The problem is for you. How do you worship such a being who would do something like this in history? You can grant that this God exists and still say, you're not worthy of my worship if this is how you behave. And the only reason I can think of why you shouldn't do that or say that is because you're scared that this creator of the universe will punish you for questioning him. if you're not scared about that, then question away. Look God square in the eyes and say, you were a schmuck back then because you could have poofed them. Instead, you filled their lungs with water. God, I do not like you right now. You can still say, I love you, God, but what you did back then, I don't like you. How many people are married here? You know exactly what I'm talking about, where you can look at your spouse in the eyes and say, I do not like you right now, but you still love them. Do that with your God. I dare you. I double dog dare you. Tell God you do not like what he did there. The reason why I'm saying this is because this will help your mind think differently. Well, I'll leave it at that.
Existence 10 times today
Okay,
he wants to
good
erase
question.
your memory, reset you. Like, I don't
What would you think of me? Let's say I had to kill a baby. Had to. PineCreek had to kill a baby. What would you think of me if I chose, one option is just instant death. I don't know. I can't poof him because I'm not God, but let's say you just, I know, like a surgery, you inject them and they fall asleep and then they eventually die. Or the other option is I waterboard them, but for real, and the water goes in the lungs, they gasp for like 30, 60 seconds and they die. What would you think of me as a person? We both agree Doug has to do this. He has to, maybe to save mankind. I don't know. For morally sufficient reasons, Doug has to do this. Yeah. What type of person would I be in your mind to choose filling the lungs with water versus just letting them fall asleep and die?
Well, we're dealing with two different things: a person and God. And
no, just what would you think of me?
What would I think of you?
You notice this is a typical response that you hear from theists. She doesn't like the question because she knows where it's going, right? She's not stupid. She sees where this is going, but who cares where it's going? I'm asking a very simple question, an opinion question. What do you think of me if I were to do this? All the Christian has to say very quickly is, I think you're a schmuck, Doug. But they can't do that. At least not without pulling it out of them. Because if they do that, they see where it's going and they say, okay, if Doug does this, he's a schmuck. But if God does the exact same thing, he's not. I had those two options and I chose the filling the lungs option. Would you look down on me just a little bit or?
Probably.
Yeah.
So what about
probably? No. You definitely would.
Doug, me, and Travis, if we all did it, 3 persons. One group.
No, but the point is, Rebecca, when I do it, you look down on me a little bit. I think you should look down on me a lot if I had that other option. But God, he has all the options to execute his justice. Yes. And he chose drowning. Really?
Again,
what I just love about this question is it doesn't matter if it's just a regular Joe Blow Christian, or an apologist or pastor. If they're evangelical Protestants, they all have the same or similar responses. Like if I got videos of me asking Mike Winger this question, and it's just like, he's very similar to Rebecca here. I asked Jonathan McClatchy this question, very similar to Rebecca. It's just like, God's God. Don't question God. I would go with what God did. He's always good. When he fills baby's lungs with water, that's good. Whatever he does is good. Don't question God.
Don't have a problem with it because he's God.
See?
And there is a difference for him.
Let me suggest something.
Right.
And I'm not asking you to leave Christianity over this idea because you never will, but why not say, I'm a Christian. I believe God is sovereign or more all-powerful. He can kill who he wants to kill. But still at the same time say, God was a real schmuck there and I disagree with him.
Because I don't believe that.
She doesn't believe he was a schmuck for putting water in baby's lungs, toddler's lungs. I should have, and I think Nathan did this after I left, but I should have made it real personal. Does she have kids, Nathan? If she doesn't, then a loved one, her husband. What'd you think of God if he put water in the lungs of your husband and he died slowly? You could still love God, but say, I don't like what you're doing right now. Please stop.
I don't believe God.
You believed I was a schmuck for doing it. Why is God... God's doing the exact same action. Just call him a schmuck. Are you scared he's going to punish you if you do?
No,
You're
I'm
in
not
God's
scared
image,
he's
right?
going to punish me. I honestly cannot see God that way. That's just...
No, I'm not...
Yeah, it's really interesting. If you cannot see God that way, for putting water in toddlers' lungs, she's basically admitting here there's nothing her God could do to change her mind of how she sees him currently. Like if God actually physically came down in flesh form, Muslims believe this is impossible, but Christians believe this is possible. If God came down in human form and took Rebecca's hands and just chopped them off one by one, or her fingers one by one, she would just look at God and smile and say, I praise you, I worship you, thank you for cutting my fingers off. Is there anything at all that this God could do where she would say, you're no longer worthy of my worship? I believe you're real, but you know what? I'd rather burn in eternity than serve you and worship you. She doesn't believe in eternal conscious torment, by the way. So she doesn't have that fear. So I do not know what's going on. There's definitely something that she gets out of the belief that outweighs this schmuckiness.
I'm saying you see God that way. I'm seeing, but his specific action in that specific time in history, just say to God,
because
I wouldn't have done it that way, God.
suffered
I think you made a mistake there, and I'm just a human.
Because infants suffered for 30 seconds longer with an infinite God who can bring them back to life in a moment, who can erase their memory, who can...
Yeah. Just 30 seconds of suffering for an infinite of good. But the point here, Rebecca, is God could have poofed them. Could have just had them fall asleep and die peacefully. Like, I'm a parent, and I'm pretty dead inside, but I tell you, I cry when I see children suffer. I really do. And I'm a stoic. I'm pretty hard-hearted, but seeing children suffer gets to me. How does this not... How can you say what you just said about... Basically, she's saying, who cares if they suffer for 30 seconds? They get to go to heaven. I don't care if it's 1 second. It was not needed. The God of the universe could have executed them any way he chose, and he chose that? Do you really know who Jesus is, Rebecca? I labeled this one of the best questions to ask Christian and Muslims, and then I talked about the whole idea of heaven and hell not mentioned in the Old Testament. But maybe this is the better question really to ask, because it does get into the moral intuitions of most Homo sapiens.
So that 30-second drowning wasn't painful. I mean, like, there's so many options.
Yes, there's so many options. God could have
just stopped the brain,
or pooped them.
I don't know. Like, I get challenged on this thing. I've so many times on my channel, atheists bring up this drowning in the flood thing, and I just think it's crazy. I just...
Well, how about Rebecca?
I got to run.
What?
Okay.
Steve,
Thank you.
What do you think if God tortured your husband in front of you for like a week, and he, cut off the skin but kept him alive, pulled out what's the hung, drawn and quartered, that thing they used to do in medieval England? Would you be like, that's okay, God, because you can do what you want because you're God? Would that sort of do it for that?
Look, first of all, I don't see God doing that. So
Step one, reject the premise of the question.
it's hard for me.
I missed this part, but how is that different than putting water in the lungs of babies or toddlers? I guess it's more painful because we're talking about adults here and a week of torture, but so a week versus 30 seconds, but it's still torture.
Me to imagine God doing that.
But you do see him drowning babies.
Yeah.
It's not that much of a leap from drowning thousands of babies across the world, is it?
She believes in a global flood, by the way, so Nathan was doing a nice internal critique here. Look at that smile.
It's not that far. One guy torturing one guy from drowning thousands.
Well, you're talking about. I would say there's a big difference between
children and
drowning,
and
which takes a minute, and like being skinned alive for a week. I mean, there's a big difference in the two scenarios.
Yeah, I don't know what Nathan asked next, but I would ask. But if you got to say if 3 times with Christians, otherwise they don't hear it's a hypothetical. If God were to do that, would you just smile and say, God is God? He can do whatever he wants, and you're okay with it? You wouldn't question God? You wouldn't ask God to stop? There's a good question. Would you ask God to stop what he's doing? Ooh. I like that. Hey, God, please stop what you're doing.
Right? Like, I mean, drowning is probably not the ideal way to die, but it's also not that bad.
Did she just say that? Drowning's not that bad? Like, really doing an internal critique here. Imagine, she believes the flood story is literally true. I asked her earlier. Babies instinctively tread water. When I said 30 seconds to 60 seconds, that is being kind. It could have been much longer than that for the babies if this literally happened. You throw a baby in the pool, they're going to bobble up and they're going to tread water for a while, but eventually they're going to tire out and take in water in their lungs and die. Who knows? It might take 5 minutes. Does that change anything for you, Rebecca?
What about like if God drowned your husband then in front of you, would you be okay with that?
Yes, because he is God. I mean, how can I argue with
this? I don't get. Yes, because he is God. How does that follow that you're okay with it? Who cares if he's God? Why does that make your initial intuitive moral response different? Are you not human, Rebecca? Are we just so different that you can watch people being drowned and say, oh yeah, that's horrible, but if God does it, then everything's peachy? This boggles my mind. I once asked this question to my wife, and she ran for the hills. I mean, this has gone on for several minutes now, but when I asked this same question to my wife, it's like, bad look, leave the room. It's like, no, we do not go there. Because it does work. It is effective, these types of questions. And this is why Christians like Randall Rouser, fight hard against this and say, no, God never did this in the first place. Because of his moral intuitions. Whereas Rebecca uses her moral intuitions to not deny that it happened, but to just deny that it's bad. Or that she has any reason to say, stop it, God. At least Randall Rouser has the guts to say the Bible's wrong here, or it doesn't reflect who God is here. But Christians like Rebecca, they can't do that because she maybe rightfully knows that if she starts to question that, she now has to question the resurrection and all the promises God has made her. Because where does it stop? It's a slippery slope.
With the creator of the universe. Once I admit that there is a being that has that kind of power, what can I possibly argue with him about?
About filling the lungs of babies with water. That's what you can argue with him about. Who is the people in the Old Testament who argued with God, debated and wrestled with God? Was it Elijah? Was it Moses? There's several examples, is there not? Rebecca, there's precedent for it. Go ahead, argue with your God. If you're not scared he's going to smite you or make your life worse, then you got nothing to lose.
I suppose. I mean, I think
Doorknob Head says, don't argue, get a divorce. Yeah, divorce God.
There's a lot of like epistemic problems.
Yeah, thank you, King James Version 1611. Jacob.
Here, but one of which is like
Abraham.
How do we know about what good
Moses,
is, right? And we've got a kind of sense for it, I think, in the same way that we have a sense for like what's hot and cold or what we see.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. I'll give an opportunity for people to come on and give their thoughts about both questions. So question number one on the table was, why isn't heaven and hell mentioned in the Old Testament, specifically the Torah, the Pentateuch? And number two, this proof or drown question for those who believe that it actually happened in history. How in the world do you guys deal with this? We'll keep it intimate one-on-one. But it's whereby /PineCreek. And I'll post it here. I'm so glad I don't have to deal with this stuff. Well, I have to deal with it in the sense of talking to people about it, but like, I'm so happy that I'm not Christian like Rebecca. Happy. Glad. And maybe there's some Christians here who agree with me. They're happy as well that they're not a Christian like Rebecca. Look, a baby fell off a bridge. No worries. That's just God doing it, says Rebecca. Yeah. But what is it? What does she get in return for not questioning God? What's the good stuff that outweighs this bad stuff? Although she doesn't view it as bad. Room's open. So yeah, is heaven and hell mentioned in the Old Testament, in the Torah? Was it good that God drowned children, if he did? She gets bliss. You mean in heaven? Heaven's not here yet, according to her. Some people believe heaven's right now, but thank you for the donation, EndoXD. To answer your question, why would God create? Oh, yeah, that's another good question I sometimes ask. He didn't need to, but he did for us. That's how loving he is. That's what makes it special. He gave us the gift of life because he loves us. Thoughts? I have many thoughts on this. At what cost, EndoXD? Sure, I admit, seeing a beautiful sunset, smelling flowers, playing poker, all beautiful, great things. But if you look out at the history of mankind and animals, 90% extinction rate, severe suffering, natural disasters, Now, God didn't need to create, as you admitted, and nobody would have missed not existing if God didn't create. God doesn't want anyone to perish, as it says in 2 Peter. God doesn't want anyone to perish, but he created knowing that some will. Knowing some will. Unless you're an open theist. And you say, you know what? I know some people, if you believe in eternal conscious torment, I know that some people will end up there, but you know what? It's worth it. I will create anyhow. I don't need to. I'm self-sufficient. I'm all powerful. I'm happy. God's content. He's a good God. He's all loving amongst three persons in the Trinity if you're a Christian. But you know what? I know that if I create, a woman will be raped in the year 2021. You know what? I'm okay with that. Because she can accept the gift of salvation and end up in paradise. It's all worth it. You know, some children will be born with bone cancer. I see it happening. You know what? I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm okay with that in the sense that I will create anyhow. That's what I think about it, EndoXD. A very powerful argument against that type of God is, an omni-God is, it would never, ever create in the first place. But that is just unfathomable for Christians and Muslims to comprehend because, look, we're here. He did create. So everything you're saying is rubbish, Doug. No, this is an internal critique saying that maybe, based on what you believe about this omni-God, about being loving, just, caring about people, wanting people to go to heaven, not rebel, not go to hell, yet sees all these things unfold, he would never, ever, ever create in the first place. There would be no sin, no evil, no pain, no suffering if God didn't create. There's not one human theist on the planet who disagrees with that. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Pine.
You look familiar. Where have I seen you before?
Yeah, it was a little while ago, but I'd called in before.
Yeah, well, it was a while back. So what do you have to say?
So on the Poo 4 Drown, quite hit me quite powerful because I'm glad I don't have to deal with that anymore because that would have been a big problem for me as a Christian because I'd really had to have clinged on to well, it's God, so there must be some reason and just kind of the awful vibingness. And my brother-in-law is a church minister, and he's super lovely, reasonable, nice guy. So I'm just trying to think I'm going to have this conversation with him now, just to kind of see how we do talk about Bible stuff fairly often, but on the why would someone say what she's saying, like what is she getting out of it, that kind of line you're asking. I don't think you can underestimate the power or the draw of being seen to be having so much faith or just having so much kind of, forsaking your own morals and reasoning and understanding in churchy circles from how I've
that's interesting.
been in them and seen them.
You're almost implying that she answered that way because she was being watched by humans.
Yeah, and because just the power of wanting to be that role model, especially when it's so counterintuitive, it's something so jarring to say, like, drowning's not that bad because they're going to be in eternity type thing. There's something so, like, just from having been in that position and kind of in that worldview.
What's your guess that if she would have thought of this on her own and not been asked by me, but asked herself that question in the privacy of her own bedroom by herself, do you think she would have been so quick to say, don't question God, whatever God does is good? I would not have said, stop that.
Putting me back in that place, I never would have allowed myself to think it. I would have never have, I would have just repressed it. I just wouldn't have ventured into that place.
Repressed it, yeah.
Yeah. And just on the Poo 4 Drown thing, I know it's kind of talking about the weird thing of, it doesn't take too long to drown or whatever the mad explanation is there. It's not even the the actual drowning, for me, that is the biggest kind of trauma, the cruelest part of it. It's the impending doom of all those mothers and farmers and members of community knowing that the water levels are rising. It starts off with, the first few hours, our house is getting destroyed, we need to get uphill, and then kind of, oh no, it's continues. It's like, is this days and days of people slowly coming to the realization of we're all going, how I can't save my children. It's, yeah, so that it's not just a matter of not just the matter of filling babies' lungs with water. It's the prolonged torture of the knowing impending doom.
Yeah,
is a mad one.
What? Good word. What did you think about when you were a Christian? Did you think about the idea of heaven and hell not being found in the Old Testament or in the Torah?
No. I think I'd always just kind of interpreted the Old Testament having what I know now. So God has revealed it in its completeness now, so we don't have to take things, or we almost shouldn't take things like in a vacuum or in context, which obviously I'm in the complete opposite sense now, because whenever a Christian tries to call context on something that they're not happy I've brought up, or something that on plain reading doesn't look great, they call context what I call bigger context. I win. Like, if we take it in the Old Testament or the whatever book it is in isolation, then it does look worse in slavery or whatever topic it is. It's when so my coping mechanism almost was to take the whole thing as a big package and use Jesus as the get out, and then that kind of line that Rebecca was saying, that's like well, who are we to determine against the infinite God that knows everything? I can't make judgment on this because he's just surpasses everything. And the New Testament had plan all along, and eternity. That was where I was.
Okay, well, thank you for your thoughts. I got some other people want to hop in.
Take care. Yeah, all right. Ta.
Okay, Erin, you can hop in, or whoever else wanted to come in. I'm just noticing something here. I need a computer tech. Like, I'm trying to figure out, do I really have a bad mic or something else going on? Because I'm not fiddling with the volumes, but I can tell that in the microphone properties in Windows 10, the microphone volume is automatically dropping on its own, and I have disabled audio enhancements and allow applications to take exclusive control. Anybody out there with expertise on Windows 10, why is this happening? Why is it automatically dropping my volume and I'm not doing anything? Thank you for the donation, Jephthah's daughter. Let's not and also say we didn't create. Okay, cool. Thanks, dude. God, broski. Thank you for the generous donation. Hey, there you are, Erin.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm just on my phone here. I had an answer to your question about like what is she getting out of it?
Yeah.
And I wrote in my comments, have you ever heard of something called Disney princess theology?
No.
It's something that I think I saw all the time when I was in the church. It's like the whole narrative that like Disney creates about like this tragic thing happens, and now you're like this helpless victim, and then like the hero swoops in and saves you, and you live happily ever after. And I feel like I call it Jesus as my boyfriend theology, and I feel like I get that vibe from her a lot when she talks. And then I compare that to like the way she talks about God when you're bringing up like the not so pleasant things. It's like a mother would talk about her son who's committed a crime. It's like no, they can't be responsible for that. I think it's like a mix of those two things, but you don't talk poorly about the person who like saved you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
And it's very sweet. It's a sweet story, and it's very comforting. But that's what I get, and I saw it all the time when I was in like women's Bible studies. It's just like Jesus is their sweet savior, and they can't even grasp the idea of this rageful, vengeful narrative that happens in the Old Testament. Some of the New.
Do you feel sorry for Christian husbands that they have to compete against Jesus?
Yes, actually, I do. I was gonna email you or text you recently. I heard about something called what's it called? the patriarchal bargain. It's where like Christian wives try to get their husbands to go to church. It falls right in with like the PineCreek theorem, because they do want their husbands to act like that. And like they get something out of it by having a Christian spouse, because like there's a lot that is wrapped up into like having like a spiritual leader husband. And so it's like a sociological thing, and it's been studied, and it's called, I think, the patriarchal bargain. If I find that article, I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And yeah, you're put up against this perfect kind of boyfriend figure who loves you unconditionally and like would die for you. Like that's pretty romantic if you think about it.
Here's an interesting thought. Do you think some Christian men, even though they find it hard to compete against Jesus, that they kind of like that their wives rely on Jesus? That way they don't have to listen to their wives? You know what I mean?
That's a good question.
Like the problems that Christian women might have, they can take it to Jesus instead of them.
Do I think that they like it? I think in some ways, yeah, because I mean, I used to have a book actually that said letting Jesus meet your emotional needs. And I realized like that actually does like ease up some of like the I guess the job of the husband to like be there for, because I've had it in my life with different people that I was with when I was struggling. They were like, well, you just got to go pray about it. And when really what I needed was an emotional connection with them. But yeah, I think that would do it. And I guess, but there's also I was also thinking there's probably an out though too, because you'll never be as good as Jesus. Like Jesus is their ideal. So when the husband falls short, he can just simply say like, I'm becoming perfect. Like I'm becoming perfect in Christ, but I'm never going to be there. And that's why I'm never going to like do the thing I need you to do. Though there's also a cop out too.
Yeah. Well, there's one advantage Christian men have over Jesus, and that is they have a physical penis.
It's true. Yeah.
And that goes a long way to help the Christian women.
Yeah. Well, it goes a certain length. It doesn't matter, but anyway, I'm gonna go.
Yeah, that's a good point to exit. Thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, no problem. Bye.
Okay, like seriously, to me, this is more frustrating than Rebecca's answer to the poof or drown. Here, let me show you guys. Seriously, I need help. Look at this. Watch this, guys. I move it to 100. This is my microphone level. Boom, boom, check, check. 1, 2. Look, dropped. There is a God. There are demons. Look at this. A demon is taking control of my computer. Stay there. Now look, advanced. I've unclicked these things. Bill Gates is of Satan. What is going on here? Look at it, just did it again. I got to physically hold this to max. Okay, can you hear me if I do this? If I bring it right down. Like, is this real life, or do I have to press OK to make it stick? What the world is going on here? If I close whereby, does it do it? Okay, whereby is closed. I'm setting it to 100. Check, 1, 2, check, check. 1, 2, check. Hey, hey, hey. See, this is how you problem solve, people. Whereby is the problem. Interesting. Okay, let's open up whereby. You know what the funny thing is for atheists listening, some atheists listening, this is more interesting than hearing talk about Christianity. Real time up and down. Jesus trying to get a new mic. No, it's not a. Oh, you said get a new Mac. I went to advanced. Oh, no. Yeah, see, I open up whereby and it drops. There's something with whereby. What in the world? This is so ridiculous. Hey, Martin.
Hi.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, nice. Yeah, what I wonder, I have a communication tab in my sound properties.
Say again.
A communication tab in the sound properties.
In the sound properties, okay. Got it. Yeah. I see it. When Windows detects communications activity, mute all other sounds, reduce the volume by other sounds 80%. Do nothing. I should click do nothing, right?
Yes.
Oh, see, you are better than God. Because you actually give me practical help. Okay, so let's see if that works. Actually, I might be speaking too soon, because if this doesn't work, then I'm going to call you Satan in a few seconds. Okay, so I'm going to raise it to 100. Here's the, let me bring up the evidence. I will praise your name if this works. It didn't work. It dropped. Check 1, 2. Now it's worse. 75.
Wow.
Get ye behind me, Satan. What is going on? Advanced. I will give 10,000 pine points. 10,000 pine points if we can fix this problem. It has to be because of the application whereby I'm using. See, I just moved it to 100 and it dropped back down to.
Yeah.
Hang on. Do I? Maybe you're right, but I have to reboot or turn everything or close the browser and restart it.
Maybe, but
yeah, this is just so frustrating. Because if you can't hear me clearly, it frustrates everybody. Anyhow, I'll figure it out next time, or maybe later on the stream. I'll take a few more.
Maybe not.
I take it you just came on for that reason, right?
Yeah, mainly.
Okay.
That was something I noticed.
Okay.
But, well, Rebecca, well, what she said, I would have said the same or something similar. Not that I believed for the global flood. It was a local flood in my thoughts, but
yeah, but even local, you still got babies dying, right?
But God knows best.
Yeah,
that all boils down to that.
But when you were a Christian, would you be okay with saying, God, I don't like what you did there?
I would say I don't understand.
But would you be hesitant to say, I don't like what you did there? Would you be scared?
Not scared, but asking why.
Yeah.
There were several things I would have loved to ask.
Yeah. Nathan just sent me a solution to this. This is for Apple. Oh, hang on. Oh, no. Yeah, it is for Apple. Oh, Windows 10. There we go. Nathan says, or this thing says, mic settings. Okay, let's see if it works. I should probably do this off stream. Nobody cares to watch this. Video, audio. This is not it, is it? Yeah, I better do this later. Okay, anyhow, I'll take a few more calls. Thanks for hopping in.
Yeah, good luck.
Thanks. Isn't it weird how this is more interesting, though? But you guys can still hear me pretty good if I keep bumping it back up to 100, right? Like it's okay? I mean, more than okay. It should be perfect. Don't I have a grandson to call? Oh! Number one, you think I'm that old? And number two, you think I'm that stupid? Well, maybe you're right on both accounts. You thought Myron was the IT guy? Myron doesn't know anything. The only reason why Myron still works for me is because he threatened to sue me if I fired him. All these liberal laws and liberal judges siding on behalf of the poor employees who don't know anything. Yeah, it's good if I keep... See, now it just dropped from 100 to 81. Ah. Yeah. No, but I want to be at 100 because then Christians can understand me. Hey, Nathan.
Tech support.
Thank you, tech support. So what do I do?
How can I help you? No, I don't know. I mean, there's a couple of things that come to mind because it looks like you've gone in the hardware settings, which should override everything, but Windows 10 might want you to do it a slightly different way. Otherwise, the whereby docs weren't that useful when I was looking through them for why they're actually sort of changing it for you. So the thing that I sent you suggested doing it through the actual Windows 10 settings thing. If you're on Windows 10, right?
Yeah. This is a new computer. I've been using Windows 7 for a long time, but even Windows 7 had this problem.
So I think if you hit the Windows key on your keyboard and then type settings, it should bring up like the Windows 10 like settings panel.
Yep.
And then in there, you should be able to search for like audio and camera settings or something.
Sound settings.
Sound settings. And
Got it.
There's and then it says adjust the volume thing there. But I don't know if they're gonna, if the gain gets too much, if it's gonna bump it back down again, still through there.
So okay, advanced sound options.
It sounds louder.
Well, yeah, because I'm manually forcing it.
Oh, you manually did it again. On the thingy that I sent you, it just says to go to sound and then volume device properties. It's probably going to just take you back to where you are, though, the thing that you got open. Yeah, that's a bit. I don't know.
Device properties, volume. Yeah, right now it's at 93. Yeah, it just looks a little different than where I was.
Okay.
And now I just pumped it up to 100, and then it immediately dropped down to
like
87.
Yeah.
Like, and what's test? Check 1 2. Now it's dropping 98, but now it's holding at 98. Now it's 96. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Now it's back to 100. Whoa, 98. That's the first time I saw it go back up. I wonder if it's an XSplit issue because I do have a what do you call it? A gate.
Right. It could. I don't know. I mean, there's something called Voice Meter Banana that I think a lot of people use, which basically takes over like the device driver stuff for the sound card, but it can be a bit involved to use, which is why I've not bothered. I just got a different mic that I didn't need to use all that stuff. But
when I closed Whereby, the problem stopped.
Yeah.
I can have YouTube open. I can have other apps open, Bible Gateway, Google, Chrome, and it's no problem. It's just Whereby. So that means it has to do. Windows 10 doesn't like Whereby.
It could be that, but I don't think it does it with my mic, for example. Like, I mean, I'm on a Mac now, right? And if I open like microphone settings, it doesn't go down if I'm noisy in the mic. It's just same. So yeah, I'm like on my output now, and I can like I boost my mic up, and if I go really loud, like loud, it's not going down or anything for me. I don't think that would be an operating system thing.
And you have Windows 10.
You're completely muted now, Doug. I can't hear you.
What?
Yeah, I can't hear you at all.
Can people in the live stream chat hear me? What?
Yeah, I can't hear you at all.
Hang on.
Let me see if.
Can people hear me in the live stream chat right now?
Yeah, I can't.
No, it's you.
I can't hear you on the YouTube stream either. Can't hear you in whereby.
What? No, it's you. It's your problem, Nathan.
Oh no, they can hear in the stream. I've messed up.
Yeah, you've messed up.
I messed up my sound.
Yeah. See, if I would expect if a God existed, none of these problems would happen. There we
funny.
go.
I messed up my sound for that. Yeah.
Anyhow, I'm gonna let. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh,
now,
yeah,
but
okay.
we've not resolved the thingy issue. Anyway, problem one: why isn't heaven and hell in the earliest parts of the Bible? There's a really good podcast episode on In Our Time on heaven and hell, but there's clearly just a really long process of people making stuff up. So if you go back to the church fathers, like people like Tertullian, who say, well, people are like really entertained by the Colosseum, for example. So Christians are saying, well, how are we going to have entertainment like in the Colosseum in heaven? And the answer is, well, you can look down on what's going on in hell. It's going to be way better than the blood sport in the Colosseum when you look down on what's going on in hell. But I mean, that's a bit of a weird, like, immoral point in terms of the idea of heaven and hell and how it fits in and stuff like that. That's clearly evolved over time, and then the Catholic Church kind of changes it again. I mean, people like John Milton have like a massive influence on what hell is, and even like modern universalists and stuff. The second question, the poof and drown thing, I just think it's because they know that there's a contradiction. Like, they believe two things that are contradictory, and they just don't want to go. They don't want to like have to revise any of the beliefs about God, because I think belief revision about God would mean reducing confidence in general in beliefs to do with God, because it would be like, oh, I can be wrong about those sorts of things.
But what about my argument about, like, I can say to my wife I love her and still say I don't like what you're doing right now? They can't even do that with God.
Yeah. I think it's different with God because, well, firstly, I think it's different because people kind of know at some level it's not like, you exist or V exists or whatever. It's kind of a different kind of existence where it's those weird religious experiences and things. So you don't want to confront that and be like, well, why is it weird and different? And then I think it's also this idea of kind of like what Erin was saying, maybe about this kind of like big perfect daddy figure or whatever. And you can't like question that, because it kind of changes, what's the point of believing in that God if they're not that good, if you can question them in that way, if they're not just completely sovereign. Yeah. So those are my thoughts.
But I liked Aaron's answers. Like, if you and I were in a car together and we got in a car accident and the car burst in flames, but you were okay and I was trapped, and if you pulled me out of the car wreckage and literally saved my life, I probably would give you the benefit of the doubt on everything else from that point forwards. Because if it weren't for you, I'd be dead, right? And I think that's what's happening.
I don't know. I think you could like give me, I guess you could give me the benefit of the doubt, right? But then if I was like, no, Doug, I literally did drown a family. Like, I just drowned, like, I didn't like the way they were behaving. I drowned the kids. The parents tried to protect the kids, but I just dunked their heads in. Like, you'd be like, what the hell? Like, okay, this guy saved me, but I didn't know he was a nutcase. Like, your beliefs would still be open to revision about that.
Maybe
it's just because, sorry, yeah.
I was just gonna say, yeah, you're right. Even if you did save my life, you could still be a schmuck in other areas.
Yeah, I think it's because the kind of like web of beliefs someone has about which are where the religious beliefs about God and religion and so forth are all tied in. There's like general auxiliary beliefs that aren't specifically to do with this one thing on morality, but it's like, well, God can't be questioned. God is special, like a special person, and special three persons who they are always perfect. They never get it wrong. You can't doubt them in this way. I think it's those sorts of things.
Did you have girlfriends when you were a Christian?
I had one girlfriend when I became a Christian. Yeah. And then we got pressured into getting married when we weren't really ready, because it was both of our like first serious like adult relationship.
Did you feel pressured to be like Jesus to her?
Oh yeah. So there was all this toxic sort of counseling around it. So it's like, well, just as Jesus loves the church, you've got to lay down your life for her, but then she is in submission to you because you're laying down your life for her, like Jesus lays down his life for the church. And it kind of fostered this really weird dynamic where the idea was that, so she's supposed to be in complete submission to me, right? So she doesn't have like I don't know, sovereignty or autonomy over her own thoughts or decisions in the household and things like that. So
but you weren't married yet, so it really didn't apply yet.
Well, because we've been dating and living together and stuff like that. I mean, I think.
Well, you're both going to hell if that's what happened.
well, that's yeah. When we started kind of forming these beliefs and they're telling us how we should live as a Christian couple and stuff, then those things started happening. But it meant that when I started developing crazy theological beliefs that were just out of whack, there wasn't a mechanism for her to sort of question me and rein me in on any of those beliefs, because she was being taught she's supposed to be in submission to my headship.
Yeah.
And that's messed up, because I think I should have been questioned on things and decisions that I was making. And then, yeah, from my point of view, the idea of like, I'm meant to be laying my life down to her, really all it meant in their language was I'm supposed to marry her and have kids and be a father and not cheat or something like that. But it didn't actually mean give her respect or anything. It meant that as long as I'm doing those things and ticking those boxes, I kind of have free reign to be a toxic asshole to her and, you know, like make her do the dishes and cook dinner every night and those sorts of things as well. So I don't think that it's a good image that gets, well, this is in evangelical churches, but like when they talk about that.
My wife once asked me, like early on in our marriage, like, why can't you be more like Jesus? And I said to her, well, at least I didn't drown babies.
Yeah.
So, yeah, all the Christian husbands out there, take heart. You're better than Jesus because you haven't drowned babies, most likely.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I couldn't fix your audio issue anyway, Doug.
Well, it's hanging in there at 90 right now, but yeah, this is ridiculous.
I wanted those 10,000 Pine points, but I can't have them as a mod. So.
Yeah, seriously, I'll give 10,000 Pine points if anybody can fix this on stream. Like now it just dropped to 79, 83, but it has to do with whereby, I think. But anyhow, I'll take a few more calls.
Cool. See you in a bit.
Take care. Bye. Actually, I would love to hear from a Christian man right now. I would love to hear a Christian man hop on and tell me how difficult it is to live up to Jesus's expectations as a husband. And it would be really good if you could cry. I'm kidding. I feel uncomfortable if men cry in front of me. Just the way I was raised. I would feel uncomfortable if a woman cried too. I was taught that when a tear falls, you just suck it back in. Hey, Daniel.
Hey, this is so weird.
Are you here for the 10,000 Pine points, or are you here to talk about Jesus?
So funny enough, I'm a software developer, but I could not help you. I have no idea.
Okay. I like your honesty.
But funny enough, on the whole Jesus and drowning babies and all that, I was talking with a pastor the other day about, and then it was a lot of conversation about a lot of stuff. But one thing that he said is kind of related to this is he's saying that he was looking at me as a mirror, and then it was kind of scary because he was afraid of being on the same path as I am, or so just a few steps behind. So I'm wondering if what Rebecca is saying is almost like a defense mechanism, because she sees you as a mirror and don't want to be there, so they have to have all these defense mechanisms to prevent you from getting there.
Yeah, that could be. Because once you start questioning the hero of the story, it might all fall apart.
Yeah, and more or less, it's, at least my deconstruction experience is more or less like that as well. You start with one thing, and then, similar to Paulo G's story, you start with creation versus evolution, and you go from there, and all of a sudden you're like, uh-oh, there's nothing left. What do I do now?
Yeah.
So for her, it could be, I'm starting with drowned babies, and then all of a sudden I don't believe in Jesus anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen that trend with people who become universalists. They're more likely to leave the faith.
Yep. Yep. Yes. The slippery slope.
Yeah. Okay.
But, yeah. Anyway, been listening to it for a while, and I really appreciate all of it. You've been. You can add me to the list of potential sending people to help people. So.
Oh! I thought you wanted to be on the poker list.
Maybe if you wanna take my money, I will join you. I'll give you $10 for that or whatever it is.
Well, it's tonight, by the way. It's 1 hour earlier, 6 o'clock California time. But yeah, email me if you're interested.
But yeah, I will. Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, you can add me to the list of people that we're going to help all together.
Okay. Yeah, I'll prepare a mansion for you. Take care.
Thank you. See you, Doug.
See ya. I got a question here from Erin. Didn't I go to Promise Keepers? I did once. I went to Promise Keepers once and I did not like it. Did not like it. I don't know why I didn't like it. Maybe it was because of all the men hugging. I'm from Canada. Promise Keepers doesn't go very well in Canada because Canadians don't hug very much because of the British background. Like Nathan doesn't hug. Australians don't hug. Canadians don't hug. We don't kiss, we don't hug. When we have coitus, there's always a sheet. Lights are off. That's how Canadians make love. Sorry, Jim. I think I'm going to take your call next time. Now it's down to 79. But now it's back to 100. Actually, my mic volume levels is similar to Christians who listen to my channel. It starts at 100 and drops. And then you need an apologist to bring it back up to 100. See what I did there? I used a word picture to explain my technical difficulties. Yes, I did uncheck allow apps to take exclusive control. I unchecked everything I could uncheck. I did everything a good Windows 10 boy should do. Erin says, I don't like to be touched. Oh, man. That's weird. I'll take one more round of questions in hopes that I'll get a solution to my problems. Try method 3. Okay, I'll open that up for later. When you go to hell, remember to bring some smokes for Hitchens. He's probably running out. Yes. Good advice, Mitch. It's the mic settings, I think. Usually extra software to drive thingy for sensitivity. Well, it's not the Windows 10 mic settings. If anything, it could be XSplit, but it seems to only happen when I have Whereby open, so then it's maybe Whereby. No, I haven't rebooted since making those changes, so Corpse Grinder, you might be right that I've already done the correct things and I just need to either shut the browser down and restart the browser or reboot the whole computer. Did you update the device driver? Doesn't Windows 10 do that automatically? Who was the best guest, most entertaining conversation today? Oh, it has to be Erin, because we talked about poor Christian men who have to compete against Jesus. Plus, I rarely have females call in. Erin's my token female. I need more token females for poker, too. Try updating the audio driver before you reboot. I'm scared, Justin. I'm scared that if I try doing that, I'm gonna make it worse. Once you start fooling around with drivers, there's a Google Chrome extension to disable gain control. Steve Stevens, if you're right, that could work. So Cameron Bertuzzi, what did you think about this conversation?
Yeah, that's really bad. That's really, really bad. To me, this was flagrant.
Shut up, fool!
Whoa, I didn't mean to call Cameron Bertuzzi a fool there. Poof. Thanks for hanging out, guys. We'll see you next time.